Hello again from my front porch. Today I want to talk about ignorance. And we had a blizzard go through last night, and it dumped some snow on us. And in the past, I always have grumbled about snow, about, I don't like snow, I don't like snow. But as I've shared previously, I discovered at least one thing about the snow that is nice. And that is that I have the perfect sledding hill in my backyard, but I'd never used it because I didn't have any little kids to be going sledding with. And so in one of our previous snowstorms, or not during the snowstorm, but after the snowstorm, Lisa and her daughter Sophia came over and we went sledding finally on my back hill, and I loved it. It was fun. Now granted, I enjoyed it because I was with them as well, but just the act of the sledding, it was a fun time. I did enjoy it. And so now we had this blizzard go through last night, and normally I would have woke up and been like, oh, it's more of that white stuff. Oh. But now I can embrace at least that piece of it. I can say, okay, hey, look, there's now some new fresh snow that Lisa and Sophia and I can go sledding on in the backyard now. It's going to be fun. Now, I wasn't totally ignorant of the fun of sledding, because when I was a kid, obviously, I did go sledding as well, but that's been decades ago. And we didn't really do a lot of sledding, actually, with our own kids. We did some when they were littler, but then, yeah, we didn't do a lot of that. And even at that point, though, my kids are both, 30 or approaching 30, so it's been a while, even with what they were doing. So I'd sort of developed an ignorance, I suppose, where I was blinded to at least that one silver lining, that one positive element of the snow that I could embrace. And instead, I was just dismissive of the snow in general, and I'm passing this negative judgment on it. Now, I still don't like almost everything else about the snow, but I can now that blizzard comes and I still got to get my driveway done and stuff. But I look at the backyard and I think, hey, look, there's all this new fresh snow that we can go sledding on. So it's a perspective thing, but it's a greater level of awareness of that and how that changes, how that erases some of that ignorance and allows you to embrace it. Now, the reason I'm telling you that story is not just because it's an interesting little example, but because I had kind of a parallel conversation of a more serious nature happen with my dad earlier this week. My mom and dad were over here in Des Moines, and my dad had some stuff to do with his eyeglasses, and we got in conversation. Now, you have to understand, my dad is ornery, he's cantankerous, he can be grumpy, he can be goofy, he can be all these different things, but he's also a smart guy. And he's 81 years old, but he's not like one of those gullible 81-year-olds who they get the phone calls. Oh, can you send me some money? Okay, let me send you some. No, he's not going to do that now. So he does watch a lot of TV. He reads the paper. He is fairly well informed. Now he also listens to what other people are saying, maybe a bit too much, and just buys into some of the assumptions that can be made, but we all do that. So I'm not being critical of him. I do that. Everybody does that. But I'm just trying to be fair that he's not like this great enlightened individual. He does know a lot of stuff, but he can fall prey to being misdirected, just like any of us can as well. Anyway, he and I were having this conversation, and at one point we were talking politics and government, and at one point he says, I just wish we could go back to, when I was a kid, you could trust politicians. You could, when the president went on TV or on the radio and, said something, you could believe it. And I'm not quoting him verbatim, but that's basically what he said. And we talked about that a little bit, about how things had changed. But then, as I thought about it, I said, well, it could also be that we just know more now about the realities of what actually happens behind the scenes. That back then, you just didn't know what the government was really up to. You didn't know what they were actually doing behind the scenes. You just were given that, and it was just accepted. And he said, well, that may actually be true. That Yeah, I suppose that's true. Yeah, I suppose that's a good point. Yeah, no, that could be the case. Now, understand, I did feel a little bad after that though, because I felt like he held out this. I remember when things were better, and I just kind of crushed it. That wasn't my intent, but the discussion then that we had really centered around the same thing, like I was kind of talking about with the snow. See, back in the 50s, when the time frame he would have been referring to, because he was born in 39, so in the 40s he was just, kid growing up. But by the 50s, now he's growing into being a teenager and a young adult, and he's paying more attention. Well, in the 50s, politicians, president, Congress people, whatever, that they went on TV, they went on radio, they were in the newspapers, and they were making comments, and people just accepted, they just believed. And then when you saw TV programs, the news, but also regular entertainment programs, it all reinforced the same mentalities. When you saw movies in the theater, Hollywood fully on board with some of this as well. In fact, we now know, looking back historically, that there was overt attempts at doing propaganda using those avenues of entertainment. And so it all told one homogeneous message, one monochrome message, if you will. Not that I'm trying to invoke color into this, but I'm trying to say it was all uniform, one thing. And so naturally, people were like, yep, oh, the president said that? Oh, okay, I can believe that. Well, then along come the 60s, there's the war protests, along comes Nixon in the White House, we have the Watergate, and the government scandal comes down around that. And it just seems like there becomes this rolling cesspool of stuff. Now, at that point, it's still newspapers and broadcast media, broadcast journalism bringing it out. But now, fast forward to today, where social media and the internet gives us this cornucopia of information, that we have information coming out our ears. Now, not all of it is reliable, just like not all of the things that, you or I hear, my dad hears, from other people, that all of that is reliable. But the point being, there are multiple sources with multiple perspectives. Now, the sad thing is, we are now at a stage where, speaking as a former journalist, I'm very sad to say it, but we're at a stage where you cannot really trust any media source. Every media source has an agenda, is masking an agenda in their coverage. They are giving you one perspective, which skews the truth of what is being said. Because you've got this media entity saying this one's saying this one's saying this one's saying this. Which one is right? Odds are none of them. All of them. You have to look at all of those pieces to assemble the puzzle, to figure out what's actually better. But see, that's a lot of work. That's a lot of hard work. That hurts my head. Oh, I hate that. And actually, my head does hurt today. I'm sinus pressure. But it's a whole different thing. But when people say, like my dad just said earlier this week, I wish we could go back to that time when we could trust our politicians. I don't know that we could necessarily trust them then either, honestly. I hate saying that, but I don't know if we could trust them, at least as much as we trusted them at the time. We just didn't know any better. We didn't really understand what was actually going on. Now we do. Now we know, because of not just those media entities that have a wide variety of coverage that comes at it, but we also have all those high-ranking anonymous sources close enough to the matter to know blah 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 who leak out information, and we see that so much more in our modern era than we did in prior generations. We also see whistleblowers, whether direct whistleblowing or individuals who slip information to others to let it out. And then you got the individuals like an Edward Snowden who actively hacks information, or Wikipedia, or not Wikipedia. Wikipedia is good, but WikiLeaks, that's what I meant. But these entities that actually take information that's been grabbed that should not have even been available in the first place, and they make that available to shed light on things. And some would say, yeah, those are dangerous, those are destructive, and others would say, no, those are doing a great service to people because we know this information. And the reality is, again, in the middle, somewhere there. But information is power. It's an old cliche, but it is true. Information is power, and we now have a lot more power with the information available to us now than we ever did before. That means that comes with that is that we have more responsibility to do something with that information than we ever did before. And that is where people start to bristle. That's where people start to say, I wish we could go back to simpler times. What they're really saying is, I wish we could go back to a time when I didn't know everything I know, and I could be happy, I could be blissful in my ignorance. Because now, with what I know, I have to willingly choose to turn a blind eye to that. That takes a lot of energy. And I'm sorry, but I think that if you do that too much, it affects you internally too. It affects you here and here. But we can't go back. We can't just turn the clock back. There are some who would certainly like to try, on both ends of the political spectrum, in fact, that would like to try and would like to silence all the other voices so that we only have one narrative that we're being fed again, just like decades ago. And make things simpler, make things easier, make people more complacent and compliant. But that would not be good for us. It would not be good for us. So I urge you to not give in to the temptation to say, oh, I wish we could go back to when things were simpler. Because ignorance really was not bliss. It was you being fooled, you being duped, you being played, you being conned. Today, those things still are happening, but now we have a fighting chance to push back because we're aware of it. We never want to lose sight of that. So, I'm not a big fan of ignorance is bliss, now including with my snow outside. Speaking of which, I suppose there's stuff I better get done. I'll see y'all next time from my front porch.